April 18th, 1943. 600 miles north of Guadalcanal, 16 pairs of eyes scan an empty Pacific sky. Lieutenant Rex Barber's gloved hands grip the yoke of his P38 Lightning, feeling the twin Allison engines thrumming through the airframe. The radio crackles. "Bogies, 11 o'clock low." There, emerging from the coastal haze like insects against the jungle green, two Mitsubishi bombers flanked by 6 Zeros. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, sits in the lead bomber's cabin reviewing inspection notes. He has 18 minutes to live. The fork-tailed devils are diving. Before we continue this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're listening from. Which city, which state? I'm curious to know who's brave enough to discover what happened when American ingenuity met Japanese arrogance at 20,000 feet. The story begins not in the tropical skies of the Solomon Islands, but in the drafting rooms of Lockheed's Burbank facility, where in 1937 a team of engineers stared at an impossible specification. The Army Air Corps wanted a high-altitude interceptor capable of 360 miles per hour at 20,000 feet, with a combat radius exceeding 1,000 miles. Nothing in the American arsenal came close. Conventional single-engine designs couldn't generate sufficient power. Inline engines overheated. Radial engines created too much drag. Chief Engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson sketched a radical solution on a yellow pad. Mount 2 engines on extended booms, place the pilot in a central nacelle, connect everything with a horizontal stabilizer. The twin boom configuration looked like something from a science fiction serial. When Lieutenant Benjamin Kelsey first saw the wooden mock-up in January 1939, he walked around it twice before speaking. "It's either brilliant or insane," he said. "Probably both." The mock-up became the XP-38, and on January 27, 1939, test pilot Ben Kelsey lifted it off the runway at March Field. The plane climbed like it was trying to escape gravity itself. Two Allison V1710 engines, counter-rotating to eliminate torque, pushed 2,600 horsepower through the airframe. Turbo superchargers maintained power at altitudes where other fighters gasped. The tricycle landing gear, another innovation, made ground handling smooth as a Packard on a highway. But innovation carried a price. On February 11th, attempting a transcontinental speed record, Kelsey's fuel system failed on approach to Mitchell Field. The XP-38 bellied into a golf course, its distinctive silhouette crumpling into expensive wreckage. The crash made front-page news. Aviation journals questioned whether the twin-boom design was fundamentally unstable. Army brass wondered if Lockheed had oversold its capabilities. Kelly Johnson went back to the drafting table. He reinforced the tail booms, improved the fuel delivery system, added dive flaps to prevent compressibility problems at high speed, redesigned the supercharger intercoolers. The YP-38 that emerged in September 1940 was heavier, stronger, and meaner. Its armament, 4 50-caliber machine guns and one 20mm cannon clustered in the nose, could tear a bomber apart in a 3-second burst. No synchronization needed. No rounds wasted spinning through propeller arcs. Every bullet flew straight down the pilot's line of sight. Production ramped up through 1941. By December, when Japanese carrier aircraft struck Pearl Harbor, 75 P-38s equipped pursuit squadrons from Iceland to the Panama Canal. But none sat on Pacific airfields. The Lightning was too valuable, too untested, too important to risk in forward areas where Japanese Zeros dominated the sky with their legendary maneuverability and experienced pilots. That caution came from hard experience. In the opening months of the Pacific War, American fighter pilots learned brutal lessons about Japanese capabilities. The Mitsubishi A6M-0 could outclimb, outturn, and outfight anything the United States flew. At low altitude and slow speed, the Zero was a dancer, graceful, lethal, flown by veterans who'd honed their skills over China and Southeast Asia. American P-40s and F-4F Wildcats absorbed terrible losses. Pilots who survived did so by refusing to dogfight, by using diving attacks and running away. Japanese pilots grew confident to the point of arrogance. Intelligence reports captured in the Marshall Islands included diary entries mocking American aircraft. "Their fighters are heavy and clumsy," wrote one Navy pilot. "They run rather than fight. They have no spirit." Propaganda broadcasts from Tokyo derided American industrial output as quantity without quality. Why should Japan fear a nation that built automobiles when Japan built samurai? The P-38 reached the South Pacific in November 1942, assigned to the 39th Fighter Squadron operating from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. The twin-boomed fighters sat on pierced steel planking surrounded by mud, jungle, and skepticism. Ground crews called them the fork-tailed devils, with a mixture of admiration and doubt. Pilots who'd flown single-engine fighters found the cockpit layout strange: throttles for two engines, propeller controls for counter-rotating systems, fuel management across multiple tanks. "It's like learning to fly all over again," said Captain Thomas Lynch, staring at the instrument panel's unfamiliar geography. The first combat patrols proved tentatively successful. P-38s flew top cover for bombing raids on Japanese positions up the slot, the body of water threading through the Solomon Islands that funneled both American and Japanese forces toward Guadalcanal's contested perimeter. The Lightning's speed advantage let pilots choose when to engage. Its climb rate put them above Japanese formations, but doctrine remained cautious. Hit and run, never turn with a Zero, use altitude and speed to offset the enemy's agility advantages. Japanese pilots noted these tactics with contempt. Radio intercepts, translated by Navy linguists, included phrases like "the twin-tailed cowards" and "fork-winged runners." Zero pilots expected opponents to stand and fight in the turning battles where Japanese training excelled. An aircraft that refused to dogfight was an aircraft that admitted inferiority. This psychological assessment would prove catastrophically wrong. Major Edward Cragg studied engagement reports with increasing frustration. The P-38 possessed advantages his pilots weren't exploiting. "We're fighting their fight," he told his squadron commanders in a December briefing. "Every time we slow down to turn with them, we throw away what makes this airplane special." He drew diagrams on a chalkboard: energy states, dive speeds, zoom climbs. "The Lightning isn't a knife fighter, it's an assassin. We hit from altitude, we dive through at 400 miles per hour. We're gone before they can react." Training intensified. Pilots practiced high-speed gunnery runs against targets towed behind C-47s. They learned to manage the P-38's quirks, the way it compressed in steep dives, requiring gradual pullout to avoid overstressing the airframe. They discovered the sweet spot between 15,000 and 25,000 feet, where the Lightning outperformed everything in the Japanese inventory. They memorized fuel consumption curves that let them range 1,500 miles with external tanks, deeper into enemy territory than any fighter had operated before. By February 1943, new tactics bore fruit. P-38s began scoring consistent kills, using diving attacks that Zero pilots couldn't counter. The fork-tailed fighters would lurk at altitude, invisible against the tropical sun's glare, then plunge through enemy formations with cannons blazing. Japanese pilots tried to follow, but their fighters, optimized for low-altitude maneuverability, lost effectiveness in the thin air above 20,000 feet. Zeros that attempted to pursue the climbing P-38s found themselves wallowing, engines gasping, while the American fighters accelerated away with contemptuous ease. Intelligence officers noticed a shift in Japanese radio chatter. The mocking tone disappeared. References to twin-engine fighters carried new respect. A captured document, a tactical memo from the 204th Air Group, warned pilots about the fork-tailed aircraft's capabilities and advised extreme caution. The memo's author noted that conventional turning engagements were ineffective and recommended breaking off contact when P-38s appeared at altitude. This was remarkable. Japanese doctrine rarely acknowledged enemy superiority. Yet the most dramatic validation of the P-38's capabilities remained classified at the highest levels, locked in safes at Pearl Harbor and Washington. In April 1943, Navy cryptanalysts broke Japanese naval codes and discovered that Admiral Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet, the man who'd planned Pearl Harbor, was scheduled for an inspection tour of forward bases in the Northern Solomons. His itinerary included precise departure times, routes, and destinations. The intelligence landed on Admiral Chester Nimitz's desk with a simple question attached. Could American fighters intercept? The answer required calculations that seemed impossible. Yamamoto would fly from Rabaul to Balale Island, a 315-mile journey over water and enemy-held territory. The closest American airfield sat on Guadalcanal, 400 miles away. A successful interception demanded fighters that could fly 800 miles round-trip, arrive precisely on schedule, engage, and return on fumes. Only one aircraft in the Pacific inventory had the range, the P-38 Lightning. Planning began in utmost secrecy. 18 P-38s from the 339th Fighter Squadron received orders to prepare for a special mission without being told the target. Pilots went through additional navigation training, practicing long overwater flights using dead reckoning and magnetic compass headings. Lockheed engineers installed new fuel tanks that extended the Lightning's already impressive range. Maintenance crews hand-selected engines for reliability. Every component was inspected, every rivet checked, every system tested to tolerances beyond standard requirements. Major John Mitchell drew the mission plan on a chart in the operations tent, tracing the route with a grease pencil. "We fly out at 50 feet, he explained to the assembled pilots. "Below radar, below visual range. We navigate by compass heading and time. At exactly 0935 hours, we climb to intercept altitude. The Admiral's bombers will be there, or this entire mission is a waste of fuel." He paused, letting the weight of 800 miles over enemy waters sink in. 18 P-38s. 4 will make the intercept. The rest provide top cover against Zeros. Questions? Captain Thomas Lanphier raised his hand. "What if we're 30 seconds early or late?" Mitchell's expression didn't change. "Then Yamamoto lives, and we explained to Admiral Nimitz why we just burned 50,000 gallons of aviation fuel." April 18th dawned clear and hot over Guadalcanal. At 0710 hours, 18 P-38 Lightnings rolled down Henderson Field's runway in pairs, their twin engines howling, external tanks heavy with fuel. They formed up over Iron Bottom Sound, the shallow strait littered with the wreckage of so many ships, and turned northwest toward Bougainville. The formation dropped to wave-top height, propeller wash whipping spray from the Pacific's glassy surface. For 2 hours and 15 minutes, they flew in radio silence. Navigation fell entirely to Major Mitchell, who monitored compass headings, airspeed, and elapsed time with meticulous precision. 1 degree off course, maintained for 100 miles, would miss the intercept by 10 miles, fatal in a sky where visibility extended only 15 miles in the tropical haze. Pilots watched their fuel gauges drain, calculating the point of no return, the moment when turning back became impossible and survival depended entirely on finding Yamamoto's bombers, completing the mission quickly, and hoping the return flight stayed uneventful. At 09:33 hours, Mitchell keyed his radio. "All units, prepare to climb." 18 P-38s nosed up from the wavetops, engines roaring, shedding their dangerous low-altitude vulnerability for the predatory heights where they excelled. They reached 15,000 feet and scanned the sky. There, exactly where intelligence predicted. Two Mitsubishi G4M bombers, Betty bombers in Allied code, painted green and gray, flying in formation at 6,500 feet. 6 Zero fighters flew escort, 3 above and 3 below, close enough to respond to any threat. Mitchell's voice crackled through the radio. "Bogies, 11 o'clock low. Attack section, go. Cover section, hold high." 4 P-38s, flown by Lanphier, Barber, Besby Holmes, and Ray Hine, rolled inverted and dove. The other 14 climbed, positioning themselves between the attack section and the Japanese fighters that would inevitably respond. Physics took over. 4 P-38s, diving from 15,000 feet, accelerated past 400 miles per hour. The Zero escorts, caught out of position, tried to intercept, but couldn't match the Lightning's speed advantage. Lanphier lined up on the lead bomber, his gunsight pipper centered on the fuselage between the engines. At 300 yards, he pressed the trigger. 4 50-caliber guns and 1 20mm cannon erupted, converging their fire into a cone of destruction. Tracer rounds walked up the bomber's wing route. The Betty's right engine erupted in flame. The aircraft staggered, rolled right, and began a shallow dive toward the jungle canopy below. Rex Barber followed the second bomber into the weeds. His rounds shattered the tail section, punched through the fuselage, severed hydraulic lines. The Betty tried to climb, but hemorrhaged altitude instead, streaming debris. At 200 feet above the jungle, it leveled briefly, then nosed into the trees. The fireball rose above the canopy like a funeral pyre. Above the carnage, the remaining P-38s engaged the Zero escorts in a swirling melee. Here, the Lightning's advantages proved decisive. Zero pilots tried to slow the fight, to drag the Americans into turning battles where Japanese maneuverability would dominate. But P-38 pilots, trained in boom and zoom tactics, refused. They made slashing attacks at high speed, fired quick bursts, then climbed away using superior power. Frustrated Zero pilots chased, but their fighters, already at the edge of their combat radius, couldn't sustain the pursuit. The entire engagement lasted 4 minutes. By 0940 hours, the sky belonged to the P-38s. The Americans regrouped, dropped back to low altitude, and turned southeast toward Guadalcanal, nursing fuel gauges that showed dangerously low levels. One Lightning, its tanks nearly dry, glided the last 20 miles and landed at Henderson Field with engines sputtering. The pilot climbed out on shaking legs. "Did we get him?" he asked. Nobody knew yet. Nobody could confirm that one of those 2 bombers had carried Admiral Yamamoto. Confirmation came through intelligence channels within 48 hours. Japanese naval communications, intercepted and decoded, revealed chaos in the combined fleet's command structure. Yamamoto was dead, killed when his bomber crashed into the Bougainville jungle. The man who'd orchestrated Pearl Harbor, who'd planned the Midway operation, who embodied Japan's naval strategy, gone. Eliminated by 18 fork-tailed fighters flying an impossible mission with clockwork precision. Tokyo concealed the loss for 5 weeks, maintaining the fiction that Yamamoto still commanded the fleet while conducting an elaborate state funeral in secret. When the announcement finally came on May 21st, it struck Japanese morale like a torpedo strike. Yamamoto was irreplaceable. His strategic genius, his understanding of American industrial capacity, his ability to inspire men, all lost. The combined fleet would never recover its offensive momentum. But the impact on Japanese pilot psychology proved equally significant. The fork-tailed devils, once mocked as cowardly runners, had just executed the most daring fighter interception in aviation history. They'd flown 400 miles over water, arrived exactly on time, killed an admiral, and escaped. The message was clear. American fighters could reach anywhere, strike anything, and do so with impunity. The psychological advantage shifted. Throughout the summer of 1943, P-38s arrived in the Pacific by the hundreds. The 475th Fighter Group, equipped entirely with Lightnings, began operations from New Guinea under the command of Colonel Charles MacDonald. The 49th Fighter Group converted from P-40s to P-38s and immediately improved their kill ratio. The fork-tailed fighters ranged across the Southwest Pacific, escorting bombers to Rabaul, strafing Japanese airfields, intercepting enemy raids before they reached Allied positions. Japanese pilots learned to fear the distinctive twin-boom silhouette. They coined a new nickname, Mo, the two-tailed devil. Intelligence reports captured later in the war included tactical warnings emphasizing avoidance. Do not engage the fork-tailed fighter in any maneuver that allows it to use its speed, one manual instructed. Break contact immediately if attacked from altitude. The twin-engine fighter possesses advantages that cannot be overcome through skill alone. Lieutenant Richard Bong arrived in the Southwest Pacific in September 1942 and began flying P-38s with the 49th Fighter Group. He was a farm boy from Wisconsin, soft-spoken and methodical, uncomfortable with publicity. But in the cockpit of a Lightning, Bong transformed into something predatory. He understood energy management instinctively, knew exactly when to dive and when to climb, positioned himself with geometric precision before each attack. His gun camera footage showed textbook gunnery, short bursts, deflection angles perfectly calculated, targets disintegrating under concentrated fire. By December 1943, Bong had 21 confirmed kills. By April 1944, 28. He flew with mechanical consistency, treating combat as a technical problem to be solved through superior positioning and accurate shooting. "The P-38 does most of the work," he told reporters who pressed him for quotes. "I just pointed in the right direction." His modesty couldn't hide the truth. He was systematically eliminating Japanese air power, one fighter at a time. Major Thomas McGuire flew with similar effectiveness but different temperament. Aggressive where Bong was methodical, competitive where Bong was reserved, McGuire pushed his P-38 to its limits and sometimes beyond. He developed tactics for low-altitude combat, scenarios where the Lightning's advantages narrowed, but where McGuire's aggression could overwhelm cautious opponents. By late 1944, he'd accumulated 38 kills, chasing Bong's record with obsessive determination. The rivalry between America's two top aces, both flying P-38s, generated headlines and inspired fighter pilots throughout the Pacific. But more importantly, it demonstrated that the Lightning, in skilled hands, could dominate any opponent. Bong and McGuire weren't lucky. They were precise. They understood their aircraft's capabilities completely and exploited them ruthlessly. Their success proved that the fork-tailed design, once doubted, had matured into the most effective fighter in the theater. Production statistics told the broader story. Lockheed delivered 10,037 P-38s between 1941 and 1945, The majority served in the Pacific, where long-range and twin-engine reliability proved essential. The Lightning compiled an impressive kill ratio, approximately 1/800 Japanese aircraft destroyed versus 1758 P-38s, lost to all causes, combat, accidents, and mechanical failure combined. In fighter versus fighter engagements, the ratio exceeded 2-to-1 in the P-38's favor. These numbers reflected not just superior technology, but superior tactics. American fighter pilots learned to fight the P-38's fight, fast, high, disciplined. They refused to be drawn into the turning battles where Japanese training excelled. They used altitude as a weapon, speed as armor, and patience as strategy. The fork-tailed devil didn't dogfight. It didn't need to. Japanese accounts from late in the war reveal the psychological toll. Diary entries from pilots captured on Saipan described anxiety at seeing P-38 formations approaching. "We know we cannot catch them," one wrote. "They control the altitude. They choose when to fight. We react. They act." Another noted grimly, "The fork-tailed fighters appear everywhere now. Our new pilots do not survive long enough to develop skill." By 1945, P-38s ranged across the entire Pacific theater. They escorted B-29s to Japan, flying from Iwo Jima on missions that stretched even the Lightning's legendary endurance. They photographed targets from Taiwan to Tokyo, their speed protecting reconnaissance variants from interception. They shot up shipping in the South China Sea, strafed airfields in the Philippines, and maintained combat air patrols over liberation beachheads from Leyte to Okinawa. The war ended with P-38s stationed everywhere American forces operated, from the Aleutians to Australia, from China to the Central Pacific. The fork-tailed fighter that Japanese pilots once mocked had become the symbol of American air superiority. Its distinctive silhouette meant safety to Allied bombers, meant control to ground forces, and meant death to enemy aircraft that dared challenge its dominance. Statistics compiled after the war revealed the P-38's remarkable record. Beyond the raw kill numbers, beyond the aces it produced, the Lightning achieved something more subtle. It extended American air power's reach beyond any contemporary fighter. Before the P-38, escort fighters could protect bombers for 200 miles, maybe 300 with external tanks. The Lightning doubled that radius, enabling strategic bombing campaigns that would have been impossible with shorter-ranged aircraft. The economic impact proved equally significant. P-38s cost approximately $120,000 each to produce, expensive compared to single-engine fighters like the P-51 Mustang at $51,000, but cheaper than losing bombers at $240,000 apiece. Escort missions flown by P-38s in 1943 and early 1944 reduced bomber losses by an estimated 30%. The investment in twin-engine complexity paid dividends in strategic results. Maintenance records showed surprising reliability despite the Lightning's complexity. Twin engines meant redundancy. Pilots nursing damaged aircraft back to base appreciated having a second engine when one failed. The P-38's combat loss rate from mechanical causes, approximately 15%, was actually lower than contemporary single-engine fighters that couldn't limp home on partial power. Japanese post-war analysis acknowledged the P-38's impact candidly. The twin-engine fighter appeared in numbers that made resistance futile, one Imperial Navy staff report concluded. Its range denied us sanctuary. Its altitude performance negated our tactical advantages. Combined with effective tactics, it represented a weapons system we could not match with existing technology. That final phrase, weapon system, captured the essential truth. The P-38 wasn't just an airplane. It was the integration of long-range capability, concentrated firepower, superior altitude performance, and evolved tactics. Kelly Johnson's radical design, doubted in 1939, had matured into a decisive advantage by 1943. The fork-tailed Devil, mocked by arrogant opponents, had proven that American industrial ingenuity backed by pilot skill could overcome any enemy. Richard Bong survived the war with 40 confirmed kills, America's all-time leading ace. He died in August 1945, testing a P-80 jet fighter over California, killed when the engine failed on takeoff. Thomas McGuire died in January 1945, shot down over the Philippines while attempting a low-altitude maneuver in defense of a fellow pilot. Both men left legacies that transcended their individual records. They'd shown what was possible when skill met technology, when courage met capability. The P-38 Lightning served through war's end and into the peace. The last combat mission occurred over Japan in August 1945. The last squadron retired the type in 1949, replaced by jets that owed their conceptual debt to pioneers like the Lightning. But veterans who'd flown the fork-tailed fighter never forgot. At reunions and in memoirs, they spoke of the P-38 with reverence, the aircraft that turned the tide, the machine that proved America's skeptics wrong, and Japan's mockers silent. In the end, the story of the P-38 Lightning is the story of American resolve tested and vindicated. Engineers who refused to accept limitations, pilots who learned to fight smart rather than reckless, a nation that transformed industrial capacity into strategic advantage. The Japanese pilots who mocked the fork-tailed fighter in 1942 weren't stupid or delusional. They assessed based on their experience. What they couldn't predict was American adaptability, the willingness to learn from defeat, to innovate under pressure, to master new technologies and tactics with relentless determination. April 18, 1943, crystallized that transformation. 18 P-38s, flying an impossible mission with perfect execution, killed an admiral and shattered an empire's confidence. The fork-tailed devils had proven themselves. The mockers fell silent. And in the skies above the Pacific, from that day forward, the distinctive twin-boom silhouette meant only one thing: American dominance.